بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين فانكحوا ما طاب لكم من النساء مثنى وثلاث ورباع صدق الله العظيم. Today's topic, as you would have seen, is about the etiquette of marriage. And just like we've been talking about all the different mannerisms and etiquettes in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed many beautiful rules and regulations for us so that we can follow the prophetic method and the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be pleased with the actions that we do. One of those great actions is marriage, and one of those things that has a lot of barakah and goodness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made nikah a very sacred act. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to it as uqdatun ghalidha, that it is itself a very strong bond that takes place between a husband and a wife when they get married. So to be able to follow that and to do exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects of us, there's a certain amount of adab and respect, a certain amount of mannerisms that needs to be adhered to. One is before the marriage, one is after the marriage, one is at the time of the marriage when a person is getting married, person is doing walima, person is doing nikah, and so on. So let's go through some of these things, inshallah. First and foremost, when a person wants to get married, the marriage event or the planning for the marriage should not be about the wedding day, because that's the shortest lived moment that you'll have starting your whole life together. In fact, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that the the marriage with the most barakah, that inna a'zam al barakati, the one that has the most barakah. So we look for barakah in everything, right? We're looking for barakah in our food, we're looking for barakah in our wealth, we're looking for barakah in our homes, we're looking for barakah in our life itself, in our time, we're looking for barakah in everything. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying, "Inna a'zam nikahi barakatan." The nikah, that marriage contract that has the most amount of barakah, is aysarahu mauna, the one that has the simplest planning or the simplest amount of difficulty and hardship in it. So this was the method of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is how Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam's marriages were. They were very simple and straightforward. It was straight to the point. The act of the nikah was the main aspect of getting married, which is putting the husband and the wife together under the sacred law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is one of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made for the preservation of everything, the deen, preservation of your own self-control and your carnal desires. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made nikah a method of increasing the progeny, increasing the ummah of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, like the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam when he said, تزوج الولود الودود فإني مكاثر بكم الأمم يوم القيامة, that get married to those women who are barren, not barren, who are fertile, because they would be, inshallah, they will increase the ummah, that I would like to see the ummah with a lot of people. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is looking forward to seeing the grand amount of his ummah. So just mentioning that quickly, so how do you actually look for a wife that's fertile? Because you've not even gotten married yet. So how do you know she's fertile? Unless she's actually married and she has many children and so on. That's one way of telling. But if it's a woman who did not have, who's a virgin and has not had any marriage contract before, then you look at the general theme or how her family is structured. How her, for example, if she has sisters, if she herself, her family, and so on, because you can get a little idea about the health of someone. Now, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes that He does not give children to a person, then this is from the doing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and something that you should be pleased with as well. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that sometimes He gives children to some, and sometimes He leaves them barren without any children as well. So this is from the doing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But remember, in any act that we do our due diligence, and then we leave it to the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just like, for example, you walking on the road, it's not that you are coming into harm's way because you're walking on the road. You take precautions, you walk on the side of the road, you take care, and you be careful when cars are moving. You make sure and have your safety. You don't walk in times where there's a lot of difficulty or a lot of danger around you. You try to do your due diligence, but after that you leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes that a car spins out on the road and then finds you and then you get hit, that's from the doing of Allah. You had no control over that. So the reality of after effects is not in our control. So this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if it is a situation where, and we do have a lot of times people listening to these kind of advices and they say, you know what, I can't have children. This is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we do due diligence to try and make the right and the best decisions as possible for a person. So the walima itself and the nikah should be correct. It should be simple. That's one stage of it. And that's the stage everybody's mind is go to first. They're getting married. What are we going to do on the day of nikah? But that, again, is one of the simplest parts of the whole union that is coming together. Once the Prophet ﷺ, when he got married, he said, what do you all have? And some of the Sahaba brought a little bit of rations that they had and they put it on the dastakhan, and Bismillah, that was the walima. Sometimes it was just a bit of dates the Prophet ﷺ had and he shared it with everyone. Sometimes he had a full meal. So the Prophet ﷺ had multiple wives. So there was different instances that he would have had. And likewise, the Prophet ﷺ with his daughter Fatima radiallahu anha, and has 4 daughters, you would see a practice that would be very straightforward. And yes, it's a time of happiness and joy, and within your budget. People take loans and people spend hundreds and thousands of dollars on weddings. And this is extravagance. This is not from the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. It's actually one of those really bad diseases that has overtaken the Muslim world and the world itself because of the commercialism of marriages. It's become an industry itself because people paint this whole fairy tale picture, which is not real, and it's a utopic idea of what happiness is, but the reality of it is not anywhere close to it. I've heard of people spending $500,000 in a wedding locally, and the night of the marriage, the night of nikah, is when it's broken up. The same night, very same night. It's real incidents that people I know of. Anyway, that's given, inshallah. Now, before we get married, you have to find someone to get married, right? So who do you look for? A good wife, right? I mean, the Prophet ﷺ, husband and wife, because these rules go for both sides. The Prophet ﷺ talked about, the famous hadith that we know about is that tunkihul mar'a li'arba, that a woman is married for 4 reasons. So generally, in the realm of looking for a suitable partner, there's 4 things that you would consider when you're going to get married. Right now, it's actually on things like it's a bit shifted. It's shifted into many different directions, but generally there's 4 main considerations you should have, because you'll see from the explanation in the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, what are these 4 things. First, limaliha, because of her wealth and her standing, because she gives you a type of security. Now, people look at this sometimes and say, why would you get someone to marry? Why would you get married to someone because of their wealth? Now, when somebody's sincere, you remember these are all. These conditions come with sincerity. It can't come with greed and shah and that desire for taking and these kind of things. And obviously, there's not going to be any barakah in it whatsoever. But if a person is genuine, for example, a person gets married for wealth, he's able to do more for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's able to help many different avenues of deen. He's able to spread the deen, do more da'wah, support institutions, support masajid, support the spreading of the deen. There's so much things that he can do with wealth, or she can do with wealth. So when a person is like that, and you see a pious person with wealth, then that's 1 point more in the matrix of the checklist that you'll have. This is one aspect that you have 1+ for, because if, and the other things, as a person is beautiful, for example, handsome, has wealth, is pious, and also, what's the last one? And has status, then subhanallah, you have 4. That's nurun ala nur, is the best situation a person can get, right? So that's the second thing, status. So status, again, because For example, some families, they have a good standing in the community. They will be able to, again, propagate the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala easier than a person who does not have any status or any standing in the community. So you look, for example, for someone who has a good, standing, the etiquette and the akhlaq of the people are good. It's not just that you're looking for superficial reasons, but these are really strong, powerful reasons to strengthen community. And that's why part of the nikah process is that you want to look for a long-time future. It's not a short-term process where you just get nikah and within a week you're getting divorced. No, it's a long-term investment that you're making for your future and the future of your progeny and the future of your community and the future of the ummah. So you have to really think about it and you have to make proper long-term decisions. The other thing that you have to be mindful of is wali jamaliha, that you look towards the attractiveness of that person. And when it says jamal, it doesn't mean that you look for a supermodel, both male, female. You're not looking for a model that makes you feel happy. I mean, yes, alhamdulillah, if you have that opportunity, but you're not looking for a super level where that is the criteria. And many people get enticed by these type of superficial parts of it, and then you forget the other main categories that keeps your marriage together. So getting married for looks is a natural part of it. So this part actually is when people are attracted because of a certain amount of basic human preferences. For example, some people rather someone, for example, they naturally rather someone who's tall, or naturally rather somebody who's not too tall, naturally rather a bigger person, naturally rather a smaller person. Like the Arabs, for example, they used to look for a person who has a little bit more size, because that's part of the goodness of a woman, right? And for example, the eyes would have been like for example, the poetry in Arabs, they talk about the bigness of the eyes of a woman. That's from her beauty. So again, the types of beauties that you look for is depending on the type of exposures and the culture of the people. So that has a merit, because even once the Prophet ﷺ said, go and look at one Sahabi was going to get married, and he said, go and look at the woman, because in the eyes of the Ansar, there's a little bit of difference in the way that it is formed. So sometimes you would want to consider sometimes that, is there something that would now make me not feel comfortable with that person? Is there something that I should have a real serious concern about? So if this is comfortable and you can, bismillah, go ahead with it, then this is enough for you. And you should be contented with it. In fact, Anas radiallahu anhu, once, he got married to a woman, but he did not see her, because it's not fair to go and see her, the woman that you're going to get married to, but he didn't see her. And the night of their marriage, when they met, he hesitated a little bit because he saw her for the first time, and he wasn't too, because he didn't know what to expect, but what he did see, he just became a little bit hesitant. So she noticed this, and from the pious women and so on, and pious men, they see how to mend their relationships without in a very smart, influential way, without making any problems. And that's what we have to do with our marriages as well. Be influencers as opposed to correctors. You want to correct everything, and you want to fix the other person, and you can't fix a person's life who's been grown up for years upon years upon years in a certain way, and you want to just change their lives. So that's a whole adab in itself, with interaction between husband and wives. But Anas radiallahu anhu, when his wife saw this, she said that sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts khair in something that might seem not good, right? So then he was pleased with this answer and that remark that she gave. And then, mashallah, they lived a very good life, and a life full of barakah. And from that marriage, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed such barakah that Anas bin Malik, rahimahullah, great scholar, was then born and from that marriage. So it was the Imam of Medina, who Malik bin Anas, sorry, not Anas bin Malik, Malik bin Anas. He came from this marriage, and so it was Anas bin Ammar. He was a Sahabi, and because of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him a great, from the progeny who would have been from the great scholars of after the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Tabi'un. So having a good spouse is something that is of a great value to a person's life. People who, alhamdulillah, and many of us are granted the goodness of a good spouse, and that itself is a very great ni'mah, is a very great bounty. Because when you have to go through life and you have that support, like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had the support of Khadija radiallahu anha and Aisha radiallahu anha, all of the wives of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were very strong, mashallah, ummahatul mu'mineen, they were mothers of the ummah, they were very strong personalities, very supportive people. So if you have that, you would see that you would be able to do so much things, because your general day-to-day life is being sought out by your spouse. They help you, they support you, there's so many things, mashallah. So the Prophet ﷺ says, "Ad-dunya mata," that the whole world is a type of benefit that you get. Sometimes you have your benefit with your wealth, you have your benefit with your house, you have your benefit with your land, your estate, your business, whatever it is. وَخَيْرُ مَتَاعِهَا, what the best of mata, the best of benefits that you get from the worldly life that you have, as al-mar'atu salihah, a pious woman. A pious woman is from the best of all of the goodnesses that you can have. That's why they have a famous statement. I hope I can remember it correctly. But a man who has a good wife, a poor man who has a good wife, will feel like a rich man. And a rich man who has a akhlaq, a wife who is not pious and so on, then he will be a poor man. So there's a saying similar to that as well. So it's very important that we consider this properly. The kind of age that we're living in right now, people are getting married and divorced non-stop. It's just part of, you're seeing it all the time. People have no consideration for the sanctity of marriage. People are getting married, like, for example, sometimes you have people coming and wanting to get married, and their parents don't know, and their family members don't know. The Prophet ﷺ made that as part of the adab and the mannerisms with regard to marriage, that spread and announce your marriage when you get married, because that's not something that you hide. That's something that should be, giving announcement to you. You should make it public knowledge, that everybody should know that you got married. Because one, it's a good deed. One is following the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The other thing is that you have entered a new stage of life with a person that inshallah will bring from and increase from the ummah and the goodness and the barakah and so on. And the other thing is that you protect from the sins. For example, people are going to see that and say, well, who's this woman he's with, and so on. So you're protecting them from slandering you and backbiting you and so on. So you need to do all these things, and you need to actually tell people when you get married. So that's from the etiquettes of marriage as well. So even with that, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that a believer, after taqwa, he benefits from the goodness that he can benefit from is a pious wife. So after taqwa, the most beneficial things a believer can have is a pious wife. And if he commands her to do something, he asks her, he requests her to do something, then she follows him. وَإِن نَظَرَ إِلَيْهَا سَرَّتْهُ, and when he looks towards her, he's pleased, because he sees good akhlaq, he sees good character, he sees piety, he sees something that would make him feel a comfortableness of being married to this spouse of his. وَإِنْ أَقْسَمَ عَلَيْهَا بَرَّتْ, and when he has some type of oath that he's taken on her, then she fulfills this oath. وَإِنْ غَابَ عَنْهَا حَفِظَتْهُ فِي نَفْسِهَا وَمَالِهِ, and if وَمَالِهَا, and when she is separated from him and they are gone in their own path, or he's traveling, or he's, for example, in Etiquette or whatever it is, then she protects his honor, and she protects also herself, and she protects his wealth as well. He knows that he can trust his wife and entrust her with all of his affairs of the home, and that she's not going to breach that trust that he has. So getting married itself, one is the manner that you start looking. You need to think a little bit long term and not think short term. Especially young people, they think very short term. And because naturally Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed the urge for marriage, the carnal desires is much more heightened at that time. People have desires of the opposite sex, and it's a natural human thing. That's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam talks about it. He says, Ya ma'ashara shabab, oh young people, because he knows that there's a reality of a challenge that the young people is going to have. He said, He says, "Man istata'a minkum al-ba'ita falyatazawwaj." That person who is able to provide, then he should get married. If you can't provide, then what are you waiting for? Get that stage of your life over so you can become secured. Your carnal desires can be focused on what is halal, and then you can work on what is bigger than those aspects of your desires, because it does clog and fog a person's mind, drastically. A young person growing up, it has a lot of impact on him, and he has to go through a lot of sabr and patience. That's why the Prophet ﷺ gave a lot of benefit and a lot of reward for that person as well. Anyway, the Prophet ﷺ is saying that if you have the means of doing that and taking care of a family, then you should. And that's one of the things that, again, in society, it's a big issue as well, because what is the means? The means is qadr kafaf. What is enough for you to live on? What is enough for the family to live on? Not that you have to build a whole house and you have to have a car and you have to have a high-paying job and so on. That's a criteria beyond what the Prophet ﷺ has placed. But ability means that you're able to go and work, you're able to bring home food, you're able to see about your wife and so on. And this is enough. And once you can do that and you can have the basics of life, Bismillah, this is enough for you to be able to get married. And similarly, if it is that young people are having a difficult time, parents putting a lot of pressure on their children, that you have to have a lot of wealth before you can get married, then this is causing fitna in the home. Because a time will come, if there is fitna and any sins that comes out of these young people not being able to get married and end up doing something that's haram or not right, then the parents get that sin, because you're stopping the children from moving ahead, and they do have needs, physical needs as well, different types that will affect their spirituality and everything else. So the Prophet ﷺ did say that those people who can, they should get married. And then the Prophet ﷺ says that if you can't get married, فَإِنَّهُ أَغَضُّ لِلْبَصَرِ, because it is protecting for your eyes, وَأَحْسَنُ لِلْفَرْجِ, and it protects your private parts as well. When you get married, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَعَلَيْهِ بِالصَّوْمِ, and that person who's not able, who does not have the means, then he should fast. He or she should fast. Now the fasting of it, Mawlana Ashraf Tanwi rahimahullah, he mentioned, somebody came and said, you know what, when I start fasting, I get more, my carnal desires increase. I get more desires. He says, yes, because the Prophet ﷺ did not intend by this hadith that you just fast a day and you stop. It means fast for a longer period where the desires actually limit, and the quwwatu shahwiya is thing, because when you have less food in your system, and you have to, it's a kind of sad ramak, your stomach gets a little bit closed in. Again, food affects you and so on, but because of fasting, it controls that a little bit. So that is the way to try and put it down. فَإِنَّهُ لَهُ وِجَاءٌ, because fasting will protect that person from the difficulties and the hardships of his desires. Some of the other quick things, inshallah, I just want to mention. Dating is not something that is allowed, because having illicit relationships, having meeting, talking, laughing, joking, and all these things before marriage is not allowed, right? So you don't do that. When you do meet, for example, to get married, you meet in a place which is okay. It's other people are around, in the presence of your wali, persons who are looking after your interests as well. If a person doesn't have a wali, he should at least have someone who's responsible and who's going to look after the welfare, especially women. A lot of times men, as you say, sweet talk the woman until she gets married, and there's no one to take care of her when he starts to abuse her and cause her a lot of harm and domestic violence and so on. Now, Allah protect us and ensure that we do not go to that level. As we all know, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has told us that I am best to my family members. So he says that be best and be very good in conduct and character to your family members. And because I am best, and that's my sunnah. My sunnah is to take care of your family members, honor them, make sure that they're comfortable, they're happy, that you don't have to, you don't become angry with them. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ never got angry with anyone. He never hit anyone. He never, became, agitated with any of his wives for anything. So this is from the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Also, when you do go for khitbah means you send a message of marriage. Don't go and chat with the girl for months and months, and then after they say, well, I think it's time now. No, you go straight forward. You do it in a properly. You want to get married, you have to live up to the expectation of the marriage at least. So you go straight to the father and say, well, I'm interested in getting married, and this is the situation. And you talk to the person and say, this is why, this is how we're thinking about, this is what I'm thinking, and I'm a proposal. So you go directly. You don't have to hide and do that. It's not something of hiding and so on. Even you have people who get married, for example, second marriages and third marriages, and that's a whole discussion that we should probably do another time. But it does take a little bit of time for that one. But you don't hide and do it. You want to get married, and again, sincerity is one of the key things here. You're not doing it out of base desires. You have a much bigger plan, something wider and much more long term than that. Then go directly and do it openly, do it properly, do it in the way that is prophetic. Don't do it how, where people will start saying that, what, he's been doing this for so many years and this is hidden and this is this and that and all these kind of things. So subhanallah, do it in the right way, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will barakah. The other thing I mentioned quickly, kufu, that if the person has wants to get married with a group or in a place where the person has a complete separate culture, then that's a consideration parents should have, that if they really think that is not going to work, then they should find ways of getting someone who's suitable or who can mesh with the same kind of culture and same type of ways of practice and so on as well. So you don't have to hire out halls, and again, simple inshallah is sweet and beautiful. In fact, parents and the wider public, when they see people getting married, especially the young couples, that's the time they should actually discourage them from the big weddings, encourage them to a simple wedding, and then all of the money that you think that should have been spent, give it to them. Let them start off their lives properly, take care of their homes, make sure that they have furniture, they have appliances, they're secured in their job, they have a little bit of saving that they can start off with. These kind of things are what you should be doing. That's the prophetic way of doing it, and that's the proper way of doing it. Not even when you have, like, for example, bridal registries, and everybody is subjected to go and register something. That's not the way of giving gifts as well. That's un-Islamic. Yes, if there's a desire for people to give, and they come and say, what do you want, and you make a little list and you say, well, these are the things I have. If you really want to, this is what I need. So then people don't double buy and triple buy and these kind of things. That's fine. But where you have a registry and you're sending out a card to everybody saying, look, my bride, the registry here, go and fill it out, and these kind of things, that's un-Islamic as well, right? Because you don't force or don't try to hint that you want something from someone and try to make them bring it. So because if somebody says, well, I'm not feeling to buy anything right now, or I don't have the cash right now, they feel pressured, like, I have to go and buy something, because what would that person think? Because the registries as well, they write down the name, so then you have to give them thank you cards according to what they bought for you. So it's a whole drama again. When we follow the Western world and so on, and we don't stick to our Islamic values, we get off course. Now there's wedding planners and there's wedding, full decor, and subhanallah, it just goes up and up and up and up. And again, it's just un-Islamic. If somebody has all the means and everything, and he wants to have a nice, simple but beautiful ceremony and beautiful ambience and so on, that's fine. But do it within reasonable costing, which is not going to be wasteful, or not you buy something, spend thousands and thousands of dollars, and everything goes in the bin right after. It's better, you sometimes you hear stories of people taking the same money of the wastage of these big weddings and going and feeding people. Then think about the benefit and the barakah and so on will come into your marriage. Also, I just want to touch on one thing again, which is quite important, but I'll just touch on it vaguely, because it's something that does affect marriage couples and at the time of getting married as well. The verse that I recited in the beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is verse, Nisa'ukum harathul lakum fa'tu harathakum anna shi'tum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about sexual relations in the Quran. So many people, sometimes you don't know, sometimes you know, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that this is part of human nature and human needs. Sexual relations with their wives, spouses, is something of need, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it halal with nikah. So sexual relations is something that's very important. In fact, in a marriage, if there needs to be consideration about both parties and their needs sexually, and if this is not considered, then it can cause a lot of problems for marriages. And if both parties or one is not able to negotiate that, then it's going to cause problems. That's definitely going to be there. So that's a consideration that needs to be talked about, needs to be understood, the Islamic etiquette with regard to sexual relations as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse says, Nisa'ukum harathul lakum, that your woman is basically your fields. That fa'tu harathakum anna shi'tum, come towards your fields or come towards your woman however you wish. So from that as well, there's a lot of, alhamdulillah, in the sunnah as well, a lot of guidance with sexual relationship with wives and husband, with wife to husband, husband to wife, and how it should be as well. For example, you should say a dua, Allahumma jannibna shaitan wa jannibi shaitan ma razaqtana. You make dua before you have sexual relations. Other things that you do, for example, you make wudu, for example, after at least wudu, the minimum after you have sexual relations. You clean yourself and so on. For example, if a person goes to sleep or so on, you make wudu first and then go to sleep. But the best thing is obviously have a bath, a full ghusl bath, and thereafter you come out of the state of janaba. You have things like, for example, sexual etiquette, where you should not force yourself onto your spouse, that they become now, repulsive of you. So that happens in marriages where, sometimes men, especially, well, sometimes the first night is a whole etiquette in itself, and I don't have time to go into that one, right? But the first night, for example, you with your wife, you have to, the mentality of society and the types of movies and the things that the people are brainwashed with, it's like, they don't even know, and they're not taught what to do at the first night, for example. Shab Zufaf, when you meet your wife for the first time, it's a time to connect. It's not time to, not know what to do. You should understand the basics of having relationships and starting off your sexuality with your spouse as well. So that's another topic, inshallah, for another day. Also, be mindful of women as well. Women should keep clean and so on. It's inviting for their husbands, and also husbands should be clean and upkept and kept in a good way, so their wives are also attracted to the husband. So that's a mutual respect that you all should have. There's a little discussion around contraceptives, but it's something I don't have time for right now. But in Islam as well, there is a consideration for children as well, because sometimes children can become not children itself, but getting pregnant can cause a lot of difficulty for marriage, for the wife, for example, for the health of the wife, for the mental state of the relationship. There's a lot of things that can be considered at the time of marriage as well. So there is a consideration that Deen has given, because even at the time the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they would do something called azal. Azal basically means a type of withdrawal before actual ejaculation. So the thing about it is, it was a consideration, because if Allah gives a child out of this marriage, and that's from the favors of Allah, but sometimes with some of the bounties that Allah gives, it can be a test, and sometimes people are not ready to accept the test. So fine, you do due diligence and try to find out about the etiquettes and how to go about doing that, but it's very important as well to be mindful of those types of etiquettes around it. Also, obviously, when you have children and so on, there's a whole different consideration about making sure that the children are kept correct, brought up correctly, and so on. So these are just a few touching, inshallah, some of the topics of marriage. One of the things that we have to note is that marriage itself is something that it's a need of society. It's one of the things that strengthens the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And one of the things that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam implemented with such adab and respect and Islamic mannerisms, that we have to live as Muslim couples, have to have good Muslim marriages, good Muslim nikahs, and this inshallah will bring the barakah. Again, we're looking for barakah. There's so many things and so much barakah and so much goodness in marriages that is done with the right understanding, is done in piety. I forgot to mention fazfar bidat deen. The last part of the four categories of getting married, the last one was deen. A person who has deen and taqwa and God-fearingness, and you can look at the signs of a person's life, and you can tell, well, this person is a good person, this person is an upright person, this person looks for, he's worshipping his creator and so on. This is the strongest of qualities that you look for. And again, if you get many qualities, then this is really good. I'll just end with one interesting little bit, a little incident between Aisha radiallahu anha, which was the wife of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Fatima radiallahu anha. So she's saying, Aisha radiallahu anha is saying that I am happy, basically, I'm paraphrasing, I'm happy that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam chose me. I was the only virgin to get married to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So she is expressing her joy that I am a selected, wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not like the other wives. All of the other wives of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was previously married. So then Fatima radiallahu anha, she replied, she says, and my mother, right, who was Khadija, my mother married Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he was a virgin. So he didn't have any wives before my mother. So, my mother had a special place as well. So that's just like, mashallah, the connection that they would have had, mother and stepmother and daughter as well. So again, marriage is a beautiful thing, and we should never make marriage a negative thing. One of the things as well, people get married in communities, and that becomes sometimes the talk of the town. People talk about this and this and that and so on. You should not pry into the house and the marriage of someone else, and never try to cause difficulty and hardship to a marriage. If you're doing that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take you to task for it. And when a person strengthens a marriage, helps a marriage, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a special favor and special reward for that person, because that's the fabric of society. As we all know, everything in deen strengthens the fabric of society to make sure that the fabric of society is very strong and powerful, and that Islam will always remain upper, and that it will always be the better of all of the options of the world, to be able to live a good, comfortable, secure, pious life, and please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I end with that, inshallah. Jazakumullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.